Hey everyone, this is Suraj and welcome to my channel. So in this video we're going to do a book review of The Three Body Problem. So this has been on my to be read list for quite some time now. So the first part's going to be the spoiler free review and later we're going to get into spoilers for this. A couple of quick facts about this book. This book is written by Cixin Liu. I'm sorry if I'm butchering that name. It was originally written in Chinese and then it got translated to English by Ken Liu. And this is about 430 pages long. And this genre is science fiction. I would say dark science fiction, more about the dark part later in this video. Okay, so what is the three body problem apart from the book? So it's this problem of solving the motion of three celestial bodies moving under the influence of no gravity but of themselves. And there is actually no solution to this. There is some restricted three body problem solution, but that's just considering the mass of the third body to be negligible. So it basically becomes a two body problem. So that's not really a solution. We actually don't have solution to this because the three body system, it gets too chaotic and it's almost impossible to get solutions for this. There are some theories which has been discussed and PBS Spacetime has a video on this, so I'll link them down in the description and you can take a look at it. Alright, so let's go over the plot line. This is set against China's cultural revolution. And it starts off with a young girl witnessing her father being beaten to death, and this influences her and puts her on a particular path which is very crucial for the progression of the story. From this, there is a time jump of 40 years into the future. So the future is actually the modern times, and there are a bunch of scientists, physicists especially, they keep committing suicide, and this actually gathers the attention of international government bodies and they'll start the hunt to look for what's happening. There is also this ultra realistic virtual reality game, and this game is called The Three Body Problem. So many top people in many different fields, they'll be playing this game. Also there's the scientist or nanotech engineer who has perfected this material which is just 1/100 the width of human hair but still ultra strong, and all this sets the beginning of the story. Regarding the progression of the story, I really can't tell much without getting into spoilers. And one advice I would give you if you're planning on picking this book is not to read the overview that is given in the Goodreads, and actually even some of the back covers, I believe, because I was refrained from reading the back cover because that had some sort of spoiler to it, but at least I think in my edition it doesn't. But I know this, that Goodreads has that particular spoiler. It's not really a spoiler as such because you can figure it out from chapter 1 or chapter 2. But hey, still, if you want to go without knowing anything about this, then yeah, I would refrain from reading the overview in Goodreads section. Before getting into the spoiler part, I actually want to say what the core idea about this book is, which is kind of spoilerish. I don't know, but it doesn't give away much, but if you want, you can definitely skip ahead. So, but the core idea of this book is that if there is an advanced civilization and if we are to them what insects are to us, then is it so wrong for them to destroy us if they want to build their houses, just like we destroy some termite hill to build our own house? This is one of the core ideas that this book puts forth, and many authors shy away from such topics because they either don't know how to handle it or how to come to a conclusion using this particular topic. And from now onwards, I'll be discussing more about this idea, and it will get into spoilers. So if you want to read this book, so here's where you stop and have a great time. Okay, so let's discuss some spoilers now. I dig this idea of putting some dark ideas into the forefront of literature, not just because it's dark, but probably because it makes sense and we probably would end up favoring the dark aspects of it. Many authors would probably shy away from such topics because, as I said before, they might not know how to conclude it, or they'll just give conclusion which basically is like every other Hollywood movie. Aliens are bad, we are good. But I guess that won't be the case of this particular book. This actually, The Three Body Problem is a trilogy, this being the first book of Remembrance of Earth's Past. I think the next one is The Dark Forest and the third one is The Death's End. So usually when you watch all these Hollywood movies or read any mainstream books, it kind of has this idea of aliens invasion and just that they're bad and we're good and they always come to destroy us. Any mainstream movies that I have seen which even comes close to discussing such a topic is probably, it has to be Infinity Wars. So Thanos has this idea of destroying half the universe just because resources are limited in this universe, and we as human beings or any other beings, they consume a lot and we reproduce at a crazy exponential rate, and we would end up having no resources in the end. But even this movie, it has to make whoever carries this idea as a villain, and that's an easy win for them. They can still bring such a topic to the mainstream, but they can avoid the repercussions of it. But does anyone have courage to discuss such topics in mainstream literature? So I think it has to be Season 2. And I want to see what happens in the next 2 books, because this book, even though it starts that idea, I'm not sure how it's going to go, because it still has kept the people who believe in this idea as the bad guys. And I don't think it's going to progress like that, but let's see what happens in the next 2 books. Okay, so let's discuss about the things that I enjoyed in this book. The first one that immediately I noticed is footnotes. Because this book is set against the cultural revolution of China, there were so many references to it which I think a non-Chinese wouldn't get it. So Ken Liu, who is the translator of this book, has added those tiny footnotes which gives you more context on what's happening. So the second thing is, I like when I can learn something about the history in a book which is a fiction book. So generally, of course, you can go read in Wikipedia or any other non-fiction book about the history of any country or any incident. But if they can weave this history into a fiction book, it's like eating vegetables but having it taste like fruits. Third one, and the most important one for me, is of course the idea that the author puts forth, which is if we are to an alien civilization what insects are to us, is it really wrong for them to destroy us, especially if they want to survive? So of course, if we want to survive, we wouldn't forget survival. If we want to build a house and if there's an ant hill or a termite hill, we wouldn't give second thought about destroying it and building our own house. So is it really wrong for them to destroy us, especially if they want to survive? So that's really what I dig, and it's actually a fresh breather that we get, because most mainstream movies or books, they don't discuss this at all, or having discussed that, give a conclusion of aliens bad, we are good. So this is a fresh breather to it. Okay, so let's get into the things that I particularly didn't enjoy in this book, and this of course can be varied for everyone, and this is just my personal opinion. The first one is pacing, and I'm not saying that the pacing is bad wherein you're so bored that you don't want to turn to the next page, but it's not particularly good. I mean, if you think about thrillers like And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie, or something which Dan Brown writes, which happens in the course of 1 night or 4 hours, depending on which novel you're talking about, this is particularly not a page turner in my opinion. Of course, it's definitely interesting to read about, but it doesn't have that story which makes you turn the page and you want to know what happens next immediately. You don't feel that way, at least I didn't. I always wanted to pick that book because it was an interesting read, but not because I immediately wanted to know what's going to happen next, or there's no sense of urgency to know what happened next. Okay, so the second one is dumping the scientific stuff. Most of the sci-fi novels or sci-fi authors, they know that you shouldn't dump so much of scientific information in one go, or in like one chapter dumping too much of scientific information that it will be overwhelming for the audience to read. So generally the way they do it is they're gonna have someone who recently came into that world, so he has to be told about that particular world. This happens in fantasy as well as sci-fi if you're traveling between worlds. Or then the other way is you have this main character who is just a detective or someone who's just following the trails, but there is also the scientist who explains it to him what he has to do or what he has to know for the progression of the story. All this is good, but it becomes a bit overwhelming if this happens for a long period of time. If someone's dumping all the scientific information to you for a long period of time. And this didn't happen a lot in this particular book, but there was this one particular scene where the Trisolarians are explaining something to this prince, I guess, of what happens, or of what is their plan and what happens when they build those Sophon 1, Sophon 2, and especially the part where they tell the proton that how they're going to embed the supercomputer inside a proton and how they're going to unveil that proton into different dimensions, or what happens when it's in 2 dimension, what happens when it's more than 3, or when it's in 11 dimensions. I think that particular stretch of chapters, it was kind of overwhelming, at least for me, because there has to be some breather in between where the story has to go forward without them explaining all this information. And I felt that was the place, that was the only place probably, which was overloaded with sci-fi stuff. Okay, apart from all this, it was definitely an excellent and an interesting read for me, and I'm definitely excited to read the second and third book. I'll let you know how that goes, and of course I'll be posting reviews on that. But generally my reading style is that I'll read one fiction or 1 or 2 fictions, and then I skip to one non-fiction, then I come back to fiction just to mix things up. That helps me enjoy more genres without being bugged by just a single one. So thank you guys for watching this review, and see you in the next one.